Hello, thank you for joining me here today at Why the Book Wins, where I compare books with their movie adaptations. My name is Laura, and today I'm talking about Confess, Fletch. The book is by Gregory McDonald, released in 1976, and then the movie adaptation was directed by Greg Mottola and was released in 2022. And as someone who watched the Chevy Chase movies multiple times growing up, I was very interested in seeing this new Fletch movie with Jon Hamm in the role of Fletch. However, I just never did until now. And then also I knew that the 1985 movie and Confess, Fletch, I knew they were both based on books, and so they've been on my book versus movie radar, but again, I just had never covered them. But recently, I got two emails, one from Dave, one from Olivia. Dave specifically requested I cover the 1985 Fletch movie and compare it with the book, whereas Olivia requested Confess, Fletch. So, Olivia, I am covering Confess, Fletch, and to Dave, I hope that you'll still enjoy this since it is in the Fletch realm, right? Even if it's not the original Fletch movies, but I hope you'll still like this. And I am open to covering the first Fletch movie and comparing it with the book, so if that is something other people are interested in, comment down below, and I will do that sooner rather than later. But on to the book review. So the book Confess, Fletch is actually the second book in the Fletch series. Fletch Lives, by the way, is not based on any book. But to be honest, I didn't really enjoy this book. I just found it very bland. And it's a mystery. All of the Fletch books are, mysteries. But with this one, I just was kind of bored and I was not even curious to know, who did it, I just had zero interest, if I'm being totally honest. And I assume the books are meant to be funny, considering they were adapted into comedies, but I also just didn't find them very funny either. There was nothing about the book that, bothered me or, offended me, so that's not my reason for not liking it. And we do have a female character who leaves her husband because she falls in love with another woman. And considering this was written in the 70s, that could have been done in kind of a trashy way, potentially. However, I personally didn't see anything wrong with the way it was written. So yeah, it wasn't offensive. It wasn't problematic, really. I just found it kind of boring. And it was also hard to follow, but it's not like LA Confidential, where LA Confidential was hard to follow because the plot was so complex. Whereas this one, it's not that the plot was complex, it's just that I probably wasn't fully paying attention every page because, again, I just was not invested and I was bored and I just didn't care. So I know I'm kind of trashing this book right now, and I know I said that I'd be willing to cover the first Fletch movie. So you're probably like, why would you want to cover the first Fletch movie when that will involve reading another Fletch book? And why would you want to read another Fletch book if you apparently disliked this one so much? And to that I say, I'm willing to give it another shot. I'm really willing to try another Fletch book. Maybe I'll like the first one better, So this book, even though I certainly didn't love it, again, I didn't find anything so wrong with it that I'm swearing off this author or something. Not that I've ever sworn off any author, really, but anyway, you get what I'm saying. I'm open to covering the first one. I'm open to trying another Fletch book. Maybe I'll like it better. So again, comment down below if that is something you want. And on to the movie review. Of course, anyone who has seen the Chevy Chase Fletch movies, when you're watching this one, you can't help but compare Jon Hamm's performance to Chevy Chase's. And as someone who has seen a number of movies with Jon Hamm, I did notice it seemed like there were certain mannerisms of his that he did seem to be mimicking the Chevy Chase Fletch. And even though overall, in general, I'm a fan of Hamm's comedic performances, and he does have that same dry humor that, the Chevy Chase Fletch had, at the end of the day, I just think he's an odd choice to reprise this role, right? He just doesn't look the part. And even though he's giving a good performance, I personally just felt like there was something off about him being cast in this role. That's me. Maybe other people loved him, but I thought he was an odd choice, even though, again, he wasn't bad. I just wasn't really feeling it. And I was happy to see that Kyle MacLachlan and Marcia Gay Harden were both in this because I love both of them. I recently talked about Marcia Gay Harden for The Mist, a very different role, but both of them I was kind of disappointed in as well, and I just didn't find them as funny and entertaining as I had hoped they would be. Kyle MacLachlan does have a few funny scenes, but he could be such a funny actor, and so I feel like he was underutilized in this role. And they just could have done something more and made it be more funny. The funniest character, in my opinion, was Annie Mumolo, who plays Eve. And Eve is the Joan equivalent from the book because Joan is his neighbor in the book, but in the movie they changed her name to Eve. Her scene was the funniest. He goes to her apartment and it's just chaos and there's fires and there's a dog peeing and she's trying to cook and it's just so hectic as she is talking to him and he's just trying to put out these fires, literally. And so I thought that scene was hilarious. That was probably the funniest part of the movie. Oh, and then also John Slattery is in this as well, which Mad Men fans, John Slattery played Roger Sterling. And then here we have Jon Hamm, who had played Don Draper. And so it is cool seeing them together and seeing them together in a comedy. And their dynamic is kind of similar, where John Slattery had been Fletch's boss. And so he's his boss / friend, and they're hanging out at a bar, which of course they hang out in bars all the time in Mad Men. And so I did love seeing him, and I did think he was funny as well, and just, seeing him and Jon Hamm interact was fun. So if they do another Fletch movie, which I've heard they will be, I do hope that John Slattery makes another appearance. But that is my spoiler-free section of this video. From here on out, I will be getting into the details of the plot, which means there will be spoilers for both book and movie. So in both, Fletch had been living in Rome, where he falls in love with Andy, and Andy's father has a lot of valuable paintings. However, they had been stolen by the time Fletch meets her. And Fletch sees in a catalog one of the stolen paintings, and it has been sold. And so he shows this to Andy, and the two of them are going to track down this guy who sold the painting, this art dealer, and from there figure out, who the art dealer got these paintings from, and figure out who stole the paintings to begin with. And so that is why he goes to Boston, is because that is where this art dealer is. And in both, his first night in Boston, he comes home to this apartment he is temporarily living in, and he finds a dead woman, and he calls up the police, and of course, he is the number one suspect. And in the book, he is staying at this place in Boston, and it is a home swap. And so he set his apartment in Rome on this website, and this guy in Boston agreed to swap homes with him. So the guy in Boston is now at Fletch's place in Rome, while Fletch is at this guy's place in Boston. Whereas in the movie, Andy set up the rental. And so we find out that Andy had known the guy who owns the apartment, but she had withheld that from Fletch. And it's not until the end that she reveals oh yeah, I'd been friends with that guy. So it was kind of odd, the fact that she didn't come forward with that information initially. But yeah, so as Fletch is trying to prove his innocence in this murder, he is also trying to figure out who stole these paintings and figure, so we have two mysteries going on at the same time. And before he had left Boston, Andy's father had been kidnapped. And in the book, they asked for a large ransom amount, but the family couldn't pay for it because they didn't have that much money, and they didn't have the paintings to sell to make the money. And so they assume that the father has been killed, but they have not found a body. Whereas in the book, the father is kidnapped, but the kidnappers do not want money. Instead, they say that they want a very specific painting that the father had owned, one of the paintings that was stolen. But again, they didn't have the painting, and so they're like, we don't have it. What can we do? And so in both, they assume that the father had been killed. And so in the book, when this dead body is found, Fletch is trying to investigate. And so he calls up Andy, and he's like, hey, go to my apartment, and the guy that's living there that I'm swapping houses with, just go see and make sure he's there. Because there was stuff going on with the flight information where the cops were saying that he hadn't even flown to Rome. So Fletch is like, just go to my apartment and see if the guy is even there. And in the movie, this guy's name is Owen. In the book, his name is Bart, but I'm just going to refer to him as Owen. So Owen is the owner of the Boston apartment. Anyway, so she goes over there, and she ends up staying the night with Owen. And when Fletch calls the next day, she answers, and he's like, wait, what are you still doing here? And he tells her, you need to get out. We found a dead body in his apartment. He could potentially be a murderer. He could have killed this woman before flying to Rome. So you need to get out of there. But Andy, because she has, spent several hours with this guy, she's like, what? There's no way he's a killer. Don't worry about it. It's not him. Whereas again, as I said, in the movie, Andy had known Owen because she had went to school with him when she had lived in Boston. And in the movie, Owen is addicted to pills, and he ends up coming back to Boston very soon because he has a stash of pills in his apartment that he sneaks in to get. And then in the book, Owen, like I said, he's the one who had the wife that left him for another woman. And Fletch talks to the ex-wife, and we find out that his ex-wife had a violent streak in her. And so Fletch comes to the conclusion that his wife was the murderer of this dead girl in the apartment. Whereas in the movie, the ex-wife did not leave him for another woman. They weren't even officially divorced in the movie. They were just separated. And the ex-wife is played by Lucy Punch, who is very funny. She's in Ella Enchanted and Hot Fuzz. So her scenes were funny too, and she just plays this pompous home decor person. But yeah, her role was very different than the way it was in the book. And then to talk about the cops, so in the book, the cops are a man and a woman, and I just did not find them funny. The female cop in particular, it just wasn't doing it for me, the jokes she was saying. Whereas in the book, it's there are kind of two cops, but the main cop is this guy named Flynn, and he is an Irishman, and we get way more of his backstory. For example, he was in the Hitler Youth, but he was in the Hitler Youth as a spy, and he would get information and get signatures of different Nazis, and then he would give the information to people in England or something. And this character, Flynn, is a reoccurring character that Gregory McDonald wrote about. So he has a whole Flynn series, and the first time Flynn appeared in any of his books was here in Confess Fletch, so that's kind of interesting. But to talk about Andy's stepmom, so Andy's dad remarried a woman named Sylvia, and Andy and Sylvia do not get along. And Sylvia shows up in Boston because she knows Fletch is there, and so she's like, hey, I know you're here and you're looking for the paintings, and those paintings belong to me now that, my husband is dead. If you find those paintings, they're mine now, basically, is what she's saying. And she just thinks Fletch and Andy are up to something fishy, so she's there to check things out. And in both book and movie, she makes a pass at Fletch, but he's not interested. And then in both also, she is kind of a red herring because she keeps talking about the husband as if he is dead, even though they haven't found the body, but she's just so certain. She's like, yeah, he's dead, whatever. And so it makes it seem like, well, you must have been involved then because you seem so certain that he is dead. But also in both book and movie, Andy as well, she flies in from Rome because she finds out Sylvia's there and she just wants to get things sorted out with the paintings and everything. But the big reveal for both mysteries is basically the same in book and movie. It just plays out a little differently. So in the book, the art dealer who sold the stolen painting was a guy named Haran. And we find out that he had stolen the father's paintings with the help of Andy. And we also learned that Haran was also who killed the woman in Fletch's apartment. And he had purposefully framed Fletch for the murder. And so Haran is arrested at the end of the book. And then we see that Andy's father is actually alive. Fletch is alone in his apartment when the father shows up. And we find out that the father had hired Fletch to fake a kidnapping because the father wanted to figure out who stole his paintings. And so they faked his kidnapping, thinking that that would help them learn who stole the paintings. But throughout the book, like I said, Fletch had been investigating into these paintings and he had realized Haran had them. And so he steals the paintings back from Haran. He hides them in this van. And in the end of the book, he, tells the father that, the paintings are in that van and you can go get them. And so, the father's alive, he has the paintings, and Haran is arrested. Whereas in the movie, the climax of the movie is at the Boston apartment when literally everybody shows up, and it's kind of too much at some times where it's kind of what? Why are all of these people suddenly here at the apartment? But anyway, so there's all this drama going on. And then Andy says that she has to leave, and Fletch is like, this seems kind of shady. And so he follows her and she is going to visit Haran. And so we find out, as in the book, she was involved with Haran. And then Fletch is trying to be sneaky, but they hear him. And so Haran gets him to come inside too. And Haran threatens to kill both of them. But then Haran is shot by the cops and they are saved. And they find out that Haran, again, as in the book, that he also killed the woman in the apartment trying to frame Fletch. But it's kind of confusing. So in the book, Andy was also involved with the thievery of the art, but then she got upset when Haran was selling them because she was like, wait a minute, he hasn't talked to me, we're in this together, and now he's selling the art without talking to me about it. Whereas in the movie, I was kind of confused. It seemed like she was also involved with Haran, but then she never got in trouble for it. And so I was kind of confused, wait, so was she in on the stealing? I don't know. I was sort of confused about that. So if you know the details, you can comment down below. But also in the end of the movie, when her father shows up again, Andy and Sylvia had still been in Boston. And so, the father talks to Fletch and he tells Fletch, you can actually keep all of the paintings. I don't want them. And then the wife and daughter come home and they have this reunion. Whereas at the end of the book, Sylvia and Andy were already back in Rome. And so they didn't have the reunion, but, the father was going to get the paintings and then go back to Rome at some point. But yeah, so like I said, in the end of the movie, the father gives the paintings to Fletch, and obviously they're very expensive. And we just see how he gives one painting each to the different people who he had talked to throughout the movie. And then he also keeps one for himself. But when it comes to book versus movie, so I think the movie is a very faithful adaptation. Sure, they make some changes here and there, but honestly, it stayed close enough to the book, in my opinion. And I was glad they made it in present day, because sometimes when books are written a long time ago, I like it when they do a modern retelling of it. Personally, that's just me. For example, Are You There, God, It's Me, Margaret? Part of me was hoping that they would tell the story, but in modern day. And I get they would have to make a lot of changes to it for it to apply. But yeah, I like modern takes on older material, so I was totally fine with them making it in modern day. But yeah, the movie, it was entertaining, even though I have my complaints. I don't love it, and I honestly don't know if I would watch it again, but I did find it more entertaining and more engaging than the book. So I will say that at the end of the day, the movie wins. And if there are people watching this who are a fan of the Fletch books, I apologize if I was too harsh on the book when I was in my book review portion. But like I said, I'm open to try another one and maybe I'll like it better. And I also listened to a lot of this on audiobook. I went back and forth between reading it and audiobook, but it was probably 65 to 75% of it I listened to. So that can definitely play a part too. Like maybe if I physically read it, I would have enjoyed it more. It's hard to say. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Let me know your thoughts down below. Do you like Jon Hamm as Fletch? Or are you like, no, Chevy Chase is the only Fletch? Or if you would like to see a new Fletch, like who's another current day actor that you think would be a better casting choice? Because like I said, Jon Hamm just seemed like an odd choice, in my opinion. But they also had him wear a Lakers hat in the movie, which I forgot to mention. And the Lakers hat is like a key aspect to the plot, to the mystery. And there is no talk of the Lakers in the book. But obviously the Chevy Chase Fletch was always wearing Lakers stuff. So it definitely seemed like a nod to the Chevy Chase Fletch to have Jon Hamm be wearing a Lakers hat throughout this movie. But anyway, again, thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Please give my podcast a rating and review if you are listening to this as a podcast. Follow me on Instagram. You can also support the channel through Patreon. I will link that down below, and you can get access to exclusive Patreon content if you become a member. And I recently did a new bookshelf tour video. I mean, by the time this video comes out, the bookshelf tour video will be a few weeks old. But still, it's an updated bookshelf tour, so go check that out if you have not already. And I will see you next time. Bye.